Okay, this is one of the highest rated games over on my request list, Merchant of Venus, old Avalon Hill game. And, well, I know it's highly popular, was one of those, nobody had a copy, so people put out print and play, and then I guess Fantasy Flight eventually picked it up and made a somewhat modified version of it, I think. From what I've heard, the base game that they provide, or they provide the classic game, that's very close to the original. It may have some slight differences. Anyway, I am, of course, playing the one I got. And luckily, by putting it out at this point, it's, you know, low enough on everybody's radar again that it doesn't matter that I didn't put it out. Anyway, I noticed that a real big fan of it. I don't remember his name. I remember his name, Eric Strummer, I'm not sure, but I don't remember which way it's actually spelled, pronounced, and I'm very bad at that, is a huge fan of this, and he's done some coverage, which is probably the best way to look at it, but I'm not a huge fan of this game. It's an okay game. I think it's fun for shits and giggles. I think it's too annoying for me in terms of the kind of thinking that's involved in it. I just don't enjoy the amount of optimization. I also don't like other pick up and deliver optimization games like the Crayon Rails games, even though I have a lot of them. I like this a lot more. All right, let's take a look at what we got and how it kind of sets up. First of all, the rules aren't terribly good. Of course, Don Greenwood's involved in them, which is one of the reasons. I found out he basically rewrote everybody's rules anyway, and his style usually were moving around throughout space and not making a lot of sense. But they're not terrible, and I'll try to hit it kind of quickly. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to shuffle these suckers up and throw them in a cup, just for setup. You'll also be shuffling up these little asteroid things, which have different values on them for space debris and other stuff that you find out in space, and those go on all these little asteroid spaces. What you have here is a map that shows, well, more than 10 cultures, but there's more than 10 star systems because there's things like this and this which have no culture associated with them. So it looks like 12 different astral bodies connected by what is a rigid map for the most part. So the lines on the map where all the different planets are stays the same, but what doesn't is these little IOU markers will indicate which race is present at each of these different habitable systems. And that goes in this culture system, or space, and you'll be using this kind of marker here. Now, when you discover a culture, you get this little IOU marker, and that gives you some free cash to use on certain kinds of purchases at that culture. And that's your kind of big bonus for going exploring. In addition, these guys, some of them are real bonus, ancient artifacts and stuff like that that can help you out. What else do we have here? We have a bunch of technological things, which are little markers that'll go on your spaceship. You start the game with a tiny little scout ship, but eventually you could either get a faster ship, or a bigger ship, or a stupidly slow, huge ship. Generally, people end up either going with the transport, because it goes as fast as your scout, or the clipper for a couple of people because it's really fast. The freighter's just kind of an overloaded thing unless you have some real strong reason for hauling a lot of goods and you end up being able to grab it on your route or something fortuitously. Each player is also of a different race, and these races are presented in the game. You will have a discount at your own race's planet, and that's reflected on your information sheet. And then you've got all the information as to where you can get different technologies, spaceships, what's produced where, and stuff like that. So the basic idea of this game is a money making game. And you start off with a certain amount of money. I think it's some, I don't know, I don't want to look it up. It's some amount per player. There's a quick start guide that probably has it, but it's like 20 bucks, you know. It's this tiny amount of money. Let's see. Again, there's no setup location here. Money, here we go. All the players earn and spend. No, they don't tell you there. They tell you what money is, but they don't tell you how much you get. And there really is no clear setup place that I remember in this rule book. Maybe it's in the quick start rules. I don't remember. Anyway, let's see. Because that is an important factor, how much money you got. Prepare for play. Line up the guns and goods. Put the drive and shield. $20 per player in the game. Okay, so the more people there are in the game, the more money you get. With 6 people, we're all going to get a decent pile of cash. Why do you need more money? Well, because there's less opportunities to just find stuff like new cultures, etc., that give you a bonus. And that is kind of important because I'm going to be playing it solo with 6. In terms of good routes, there's 1, 2, 3, well, 1, 2, maybe 3, 4 places where people can jump to, call it 5 at best, that people can move to fairly easily and discover a culture. Okay? So if we're at 4 or 5 of those, there's a couple of people who are just going to be running on their cash itself, and they're not going to get any bonuses. So the more players, the more likelihood that you need cash. In 3 players or so, you really don't need a lot of cash, but that's okay. Let's take a look at the different spaces on the board, I guess. I don't know. Something like that. Counter-wise, yeah, let's look at the counters. So we already touched these. These indicate the different races. Each race has its own production, which is little counters that it'll make. And these will all be available at the beginning of the game. You can buy them for a purchase price, and if you sell them, they'll bring you a higher value. Great. On the back of the counter, it tells you where you can sell them, and essentially you can sell them at the next 3 species. So this is a 1 chip. It'll be sold at 2, 3, and 4. But there are splits, like there's 2 1s and 2 4s, 2 7s, and 2 9s. So that I think you're always guaranteed 4 locations you can sell everything at. I'm positive about that. I'm sure other people have devised it. You also have these, which are factory products. You have to build a factory in order to be able to produce them. And once they're produced, you get a cut from whoever buys it from the factory, which could be yourself. And there are also little counters here for players indicating, these are the factories here. These are indicating space stations, which allow for faster buying and selling of materials. And the person who owns the space station gets a cut. What else do we have? Over here we have a bag of demand counters. At the beginning of the game, these all start in a little cup after setup. And whenever you deliver something, it gets thrown back into the cup after you get your cash. And then you draw new replacement counters, which could be the same goods or some other earlier discarded goods, or it could be one of these demand markers, and these things say, hey, next time somebody delivers this, and it'll give a location where the bonus is prevalent, they get this much extra money. And those can stack, and only one gets discarded with each sale. So if, for example, I ship 2 of a commodity to a location that has a double bonus, I would get twice the bonus selling the first commodity and then 1 times it on the second. And all the counters go back in the cup. Any commodities that are sold, as well as any bonuses that are used. And then that many new counters are drawn and placed where they belong on the board. Commodities show up where they're produced, whichever culture produces them. And that culture has been discovered because you're already shipping that stuff. And demand markers are thrown back on the board wherever the new demand arises, and that's listed on the back of the counter. There is also passenger markers, these fares, which indicate one place you pick somebody up and a place you get to drop people off. Now, in order to carry people, you need to put them in the hold. And I think you can carry 2 passengers per hold space, if I recall correctly. Oh, what else? Well, if you stop on an asteroid, you get to pick up what's there. These little red, so the coloring's kind of interesting here. You're going to be rolling dice for movement. You have a number of dice to move based on your ship. So, for example, the scout ship you start off with gets 3 dice. You roll those dice, and that's how many spaces you get to move. If you land on a space with a cost, that's an amount of dollars you have to spend in damage or whatever to just zip through that space. Or you could just stop and not pay that amount. Now, obviously, if you're going to travel around this supergiant, you'd be stopping a lot, and it's advantageous to maybe pay the money. You roll the dice, you take the sum of them, and so, for example, if I'm rolling 3 of these, I could roll, say, an 11. I'd be able to move 11 dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever. There are drives in the game that allow you to skip certain colors, red and yellow particularly. And there you don't have to pay the hazard, the navigation hazard, if it's in that color, and you just don't count those dots. There's also spaces that are landing spaces, where you're allowed to sail down as a movement and land on the planet. And that kind of ends your turn to do that, but then you can deal there. Alternatively, you can land at a space station and do dealing. Now, trying to remember, I know that there are little, here we go, trading, yeah, you're allowed to make like 1 deal when you first land on a planet, and otherwise you have to spend the next turn just trading. But space stations increase your speed. You're able to buy and sell everything on the turn you land in them. You don't have to spend that extra movement or whatever, well, extra deal spending to land on a planet. So space stations are a bonus. The problem with them is, or bonus for them, is that they produce 10% of all revenue that passes through their hand to the owner of the space station. The game starts out with a space station over here, and I think there's another one here. Oh no, this one, these are ones you can build. This counts as a city, so it doesn't count as one. This counts as a city. You just don't have to land on the planet. But I think there may be a space station as one of the random counters that can come up that allows you to trade without dealing with a person. Let's see what else we got. Alright, so your goal is to hit some amount of money, and somewhere or another they have winning rules buried in this thing. And again, I don't want to read the rules. I mostly know them, but I can kind of remind myself of them. Winning the game. So there's basically 3 different games you can play according to this, but of course you could play more. The base game is $2,000. You have to collect $2,000 in cash and in deeds. Deeds are worth their value. They're a way to invest money, especially if you have the IOU for a planet. It's a good way to turn that IOU into cash. What doesn't count is your spaceship, and you must always have a spaceship, which means if you spend a lot of money on a spaceship, you may want to sell it towards the end of the game to raise some extra cash. Let's see, what else? That's about it. So the advanced game, or optional game, adds a few additional rules. Let's take a look at some of these. First one, not many. The first one is game length, and you're allowed to shorten the game to $1,000, or play it to $2,000, or play it higher. And I'll be playing it to the full $4,000 because that gives you the most options to kind of build up routes, in particular production routes. The game's not really about that though. It's mainly about capitalizing on opportunities, which is to say the board changes throughout the play of the game and you can't settle down to one trade route and just use it again and again. And you don't really own anything that gives you huge advantages. So if you own a factory or a space station, anybody can use it. You get some extra cash from it, whether you use it or someone else uses it. So there's not a huge advantage to use it to going on routes that have your own stations. There is one advantage, which is you'll notice some of these planets have multiple space stations. That means that if multiple people have space stations there, you get your choice, and you might help the person who's doing the worst by landing at their station. You certainly would help yourself if you have it there. So there's some advantage to having been through an area before, but it's pretty limited. For the most part, it's just that the board morphs a little bit more. Some of these special alien technologies that show up in here can be pretty interesting, and we'll see them as they show up. They can have a severe effect on a player's ability to win. Some of them aren't too hot, and they might not be great for you at a particular time, and you can sell them back to the planets for some money. We're also going to be playing with combat. Combat's a fairly simple matter. However, it's usually not worth it for players. The way it works is that while you're moving, you can stop and you can shoot someone. And there's also these theft attacks. The way the attack is used, you fire a weapon and or pay money to start an attack. You roll the die and add some bonuses. The bonuses are going to be based on your weapon. So for example, a laser has a bonus of 20. A Nova Ball has a bonus of 20. You have the costs here, I guess. They each have specific weight. So for example, here you're able to carry a certain amount of stuff for free on your hull. But then in your hold, you could carry 2 equipment or an equipment and a fare in one hold instead of a good. And that allows you to have extra stuff. There are things like engines. These are all covered in the non-weapon stuff. But basically, you'll be rolling a die and adding a bonus from the weapon. And then, I don't remember what happens if you win. You make 1 attack each time you move on a dot if you wish. Jeez. The number you roll plus your firepower. Shields subtract. If you inflict a hit, you can do damage to their hull, to an item on their hull, or in the hold. Now this could dislodge some stuff from the hold, which you can then pick up. Likewise, you can make theft attacks in cities and spaceports. For the most part, this is a rule that we never played with. I play with it solitaire usually. I tried it once in an opposed game. It didn't really add a lot to the game. It does add a little bit of, okay, look, this guy's doing well, let's hit him. Okay. But that just kind of drags out the game, and it doesn't really add a lot of fun to it. One thing that it does allow, though, is with lasers, for example, you can shoot these penalty markers. So you may want to be armed for kind of this combined thing, and that's why I use them there. You get cash if you destroy a penalty marker from here. You get a bonus for clearing the navigation ways. There's also these Rastas. I am not going to play with them. There's a number of them that show up based on the length of the game. They suggest not using them with any more than 2 players, and you must use them in the solitaire game. Basically, there are a bunch of additional penalties that show up all over the board, and some of them are quite big, like this 230, that really kind of hose you. And in the solitaire game, they have a, well, in either case, they have a chance of knocking, making it so nobody wins, so that they wipe you out. And there's this little funny thing that you use to handle them. I didn't find that terribly interesting. I, of course, would rather play it as a multiplayer game. Mainly, I just throw the weapons in with kind of the, all right, I'll use them if I have to. I know that Eric probably covered the rules a lot better than I would. I have no interest in covering the specifics of all the rules of the game. but your basis here is that you're going to be sailing around, searching for initially for cultures, and then moving into a situation where you're trying to find routes that you can optimize the cash payouts on. And we'll see how this plays out. It's never been a great game, Solitaire, because it requires too much thought per player. I don't even like it multiplayer because I have to sit there and try to figure out, after everybody else is gone, okay, now what have they taken? What's still available to me? What can I do? Unlike something like Crayon Rails, which is another pick up and deliver type game, in that game, you make your decision and then you just can stick with it. This, it's constantly changing. So there's a real headache aspect because somebody steals some goods, you want it, and then you have to change your mind about what you're going. Also has the same problem with Crayon Rails, which is if you do as I like to do and walk away from the table for an hour or two and come back, you don't know what you're up to, what you're carrying where, which direction you're going, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's a game that really has to be played sitting through one play. Oh, which I of course will not do. All right, up this goes, and we'll get this done.